The Art of Leadership Network.
Welcome to the LeadCulture Podcast, part of the Art of Leadership Network. I'm your host, Jenny Catron, CEO of the Foresight Group, and so glad that you are with us today. Foresight is a company that is dedicated to helping leaders develop thriving teams. Each week, I'll be your guide as we explore practical strategies to equip you with the tools you need to lead with clarity, confidence, and build unstoppable momentum in your organization. My mission is to be your trusted coach, empowering you to master the art of self-leadership so you'll learn to lead yourself well so you can lead others better. Each week, we take a deep dive on a leadership or a culture topic. You'll hear stories from amazing guests and leaders like you who are committed to leading well. So let's dive in and keep learning on this leadership journey together. Friends, today I am joined by Jordan Montgomery. Jordan is the owner of Montgomery Companies, a highly regarded performance coach and keynote speaker whose clients include business executives, sales organizations, and entrepreneurs. From small town Iowa to a dominant force in the performance coaching industry, Jordan travels the country speaking and coaching executives at Fortune 500 companies, professional athletes, and salespeople. In addition to his work speaking and coaching, Jordan is an accomplished business leader who has managed top performing sales teams in the financial services industry. Jordan resides in Tiffin, Iowa with his wife, Ashley, his son, McCoy, and his three daughters, Audrey, Claire, and Olivia. When he's not writing, coaching, or speaking, Jordan spends time with his family and enjoys the outdoors. He's a lover of sports and all things Iowa Hawkeyes. Guys, my conversation with Jordan was so fantastic. He and I connected probably a little over a year ago at a John Maxwell event. And instantly, Jordan was just somebody that I was just drawn to. Just his energy, his enthusiasm, his passion, his commitment. And then what I quickly discovered was that he also is really intentional, like his intentionality in really knowing people and seeing people. And that comes through in our conversation today. Jordan's talking a lot about his brand new book, The Art of Encouragement, how to lead teams, spread love, and serve from the heart. And the thing I love about this, when you are sharing a new book and you're interviewing an author, you sometimes are just kind of hoping that they actually embody the very thing they're talking about. And what's so fun about this is in the short time I've gotten to know Jordan, this is who he is. Like when I saw the title of the book, when I saw the subject matter, I was like, of course, this is who Jordan is. And so today he's going to dig into this topic of the art of encouragement, how to be an authentic encourager and why it matters. Gives us a lot of insights, a lot of perspective and data on how powerful encouragement is. We talk about substance and specificity and why that is so critical in encouragement. He talks about when encouragement means the most and how important it is for people to feel seen, valued, and known. So here's my conversation with Jordan Montgomery. All right, Jordan, this one I feel like has been long overdue. Just the opportunity to catch up with you, and you've got a new book coming out. So I'm pretty excited to jump into that. But before I do, I did the official bio in the intro. Maybe just give everybody a little glimpse of your world, who you are, what you do.
Yeah, well, thank you, Jenny, for having me on the podcast, first and foremost. And it's fun to be going through this season with you. You also have a book coming out, as your That's community right. knows. So just fun to do this with you. And you're going to be on our podcast. And so cool that we get to spend some time together and catch up. I am married to Ashley. We have 4 children, live in small town Iowa, actually just outside of Iowa City, where the University of Iowa is at. And we run the Montgomery Companies. So there's a team of 22 of us right now. And our focus is organizational health and leadership development. So we really spend time with 3 groups. It's sort of executive leaders, salespeople, and athletes. And I always tell folks that we work with 2 types of people who are in the performance business. So they're trying to drive a result, or they're in the people business, building relationships. And so keynote speaker and a coach for a living. We do have this new book coming out, The Art of Encouragement, which drops July 23rd. And so, we're just loving life, feel blessed, and cool that we get to do these conversations with people like you. So thanks again for having me.
Well, and I know my listeners already know, as soon as you said that you focus on organizational health and leadership development, they know exactly why I am so grateful that you joined us, and love having these conversations with people who share similar passions. And you do work in such a unique space. You reference some of the people you specifically serve. And I love that. I love that uniqueness, and I love that dynamic, which I'm sure we'll get into a little bit. But I also can appreciate somebody who lives in the Midwest like I do, and generally seems to and you said you're loving life, right? And so I'm like, I appreciate, of course, it is summer for us as Midwesterners, so we are actually loving life right now. But right. I appreciate, which goes hand in hand with your book, The Art of Encouragement. My first question with you is, have you always been an encourager? Because you do have such a joyful, encouraging presence. You and I met maybe a little over a year ago in person. And it's one of the things that is just so captivating about you is that you just have this positive, encouraging spirit. So I want to know, have you always been that way?
Well, right back at you. I think we share that in common. And I do think God gives each person different and unique levels of energy or personality. And so, I can say, I think as part of who God created me to be, I enjoy people. I am extroverted. But it's interesting. I think so many times encouragement comes synonymous with energy, or people feel like I've got to have big energy or be highly relational or extroverted to be an encouraging person. And I don't think that's true. So there's probably someone listening thinking, Jenny and Jordan are both extroverts. They love people. They're energetic. Of course, it's easy for them to be encouraging. And I just want to hear you say, while I do think I'm a natural encourager, I think we all understand the language of encouragement. I think we speak it. I think we can understand it. Anyone can do this. And part of the reason we wrote the book, Jenny, is I think it speaks to the most basic human need that we have psychologically, which is the need to be known and seen. And I think if you can make people feel known and seen, you'll be a great encourager, regardless of whether you feel like you're an encourager or not. That's what this book is about. I also think this, Jenny, that too many times we overestimate our ability, myself included, as a self-proclaimed encourager, I overestimate my ability to make people feel known and seen. And so I don't think encouragement is a do-don't topic. It's not something I do or don't do. I actually think it's a science. There's an art to it. There's a lot of nuance. That nuance for you, Jenny, comes very natural. Now, part of that is your experience. You've been leading and teaching and training for so long that that's just part of who you are.
Sure.
But for most people, it doesn't come natural. It's fairly nuanced. I think there's a lot that goes into it. And I wrote the book, and I'll say this, I have a ton of work to do in the different areas of encouragement.
Yeah. That was going to be my next question for you, was just, do you think people are natural encouragers? Is it a skill we develop? I love that you acknowledge that sometimes we overestimate how well we are encouraging others. I can't tell you the number of conversations, particularly with my husband, right? These are where those conversations come up the most, that you feel like you're being encouraging and that's not experienced that way. Or you think you're maybe not being discouraging, and yet, maybe you're unintentionally being discouraging. So maybe coach us just a little bit on, how do we develop it? You mentioned it being an art. I'd love for you to just unpack it a little bit as you've studied this, and maybe you need to even back up and tell us why it even matters. So I'll kind of let you pick and choose what you want to, pretend we just need Encourager 101 class. What do we need to know to start thinking about this differently?
Well, I love that you said Encourager 101, because this is a fairly simple book on a simple topic. However, I think there's a lot of layers to it. And sometimes we forget about those layers, or we're not in tune with those layers. What's common sense is not always common practice. And so if you're reading this book, what I would tell you is the book is full of a lot of reminders and practical truth. But we can dig into that. So the first chapter of the book is The Art of Character Encouragement. I believe, Jenny, that we live in a world that is obsessed with charisma and undervalues character.
Ooh.
We are obsessed with results and we undervalue character traits and qualities. And so what happens is, as we encourage people, whether it's our children, our friends, people in the workplace, we tend to overemphasize results. We tend to overdo what that person's doing, and we underdo their character and who they are as a person. We see this a lot in our athlete clients because people fall in love with what they do without really knowing anything about who they are. And I've been telling this story. I had a really unique experience with an athlete client of ours 2 years ago who bumped into an article during the season, and it was about him and it wasn't positive. And the article was basically suggesting that his best years had passed him by. So he calls me, he's a little bit sideways, and he's just one of the best humans you could ever know, like just a phenomenal guy, also a great football player. And he's like, man, I read this little article, and it was literally, Jenny, like 4 or 5 sentences. It wasn't even that big of a deal, but it was a big deal to him. And it was affecting him beyond the game of football. He's like, man, I've been sideways the last 2 days. Like, maybe I'm just getting old. Like, I'm not the same guy I used to be. I don't have the same skip in my step. Like, I could tell it was just really heavy on him.
Yep.
And I said, well, man, can I help you with that? And he's like, well, yeah, that's why I called. And I said, okay, well, here's the deal. You're a great football player, and I love what you do. I love all of your accomplishments and accolades. And he's a 5-time Pro Bowler. He's a former first-round draft pick. He's going to make $200 million playing the game of football, and just a phenomenal athlete. Love what he does. We don't want to minimize that.
Sure.
However, it has very little to do with who he is. Actually, it's who he is that drives what he does. And so I said to him, I said, Brandon, listen, man, I love that you're a great football player and 5-time Pro Bowler and team captain, et cetera, right? And you should be proud of those things. I don't want to minimize that. Can I just tell you, it has almost nothing to do with what I appreciate about you and how I see you. I said, Brandon, I see a guy that has just like the biggest heart when I look at you. Like, God gave you a supersized heart for people. Like, you see things in people, you read things about people, you have this gift of intuition and discernment. Like, you just see things that people don't see. I think you see when someone is hurting. I think you see when somebody has a gift. Like, you see things in people before they see it in themselves. And Brandon, I think it's your big heart and your intuition and that gift of discernment that's actually allowed you to lead and be a team captain and excel. Yeah. And listen, man, there's other guys that are 6'5" and 310 pounds that don't make it 10 years and play at the highest level. The very reason that you're doing what you're doing is because of who you are and the way that you've decided to steward the gifts that God's given you. And I think that's really special. And so let's not let some guy in New York City that doesn't know you write 4 sentences that make you question who you are. And we hear that and we're like, oh yeah, great example. But football player, and that's a real tangible kind of thing to get our arms around. Well, I think it happens with our kids. I think it happens with our friends. I think it happens with our spouse. I think sometimes we forget to slow down and say, I see you, you matter.
Right.
I notice, Jenny, like I want you to know that I notice and you matter and you have gifts that other people don't have. I value you for who you are.
That's really powerful. When did this become such a point of awareness for you? Like, what was that aha moment for you of recognizing, like, being an encourager really matters and is really significant? What did that look like for you?
In this book, we talk about the art of the valley. Like, when you're broken, I think when encouragement means the most is when you're the most broken, or when you have the deepest level of hurt. It's kind of like if you have no money and you're totally broke, and I've been there, $10 means more than if you feel financially strong. And $1,000, I mean, that's just like, so same thing with encouragement. When somebody comes alongside you and they're overly positive, or they're just like abundantly gracious and caring.
Yeah.
It just means a lot when you're in a season of hurt. So at 27 years old, some of my story, Jenny, like I got fired from a big Fortune 100 firm. It was incredibly public. I lost a lot of money. I was so ashamed. this guy by the name of Tim Bohannon kind of takes me in, and he says, hey, you can work at my firm. Here's how this is going to work. No teaching, no training, no speaking. You're just going to rebuild your business and rebuild your life, and I'm going to help you do it.
Wow.
And in the most like truth-filled, candid, direct, but also caring way, he encouraged me like I've never been encouraged. And so actually a lot of this book is about Tim and his influence on my life. And, back to the who over the do, where did I experience that? I experienced that with a mentor, Tim Bohannon. And I've experienced it with others. I mean, my father was a great encourager. I just had many people who believed in me before I believed in myself. And so part of this book is really a tribute to them. It's a tribute to the people who picked me up when I needed it most, or who saw something in me before I saw it in myself.
That's such a gift, isn't it? Like I've had those leaders in my life too, that you look back and reflect on, and you're like, gosh, if they hadn't seen that in me, if they hadn't called that out on me. And so then it compels you even more to go, okay, who am I doing that for? Right? Who am I seeing that possibility, that potential? That's the leadership and team development part of me that gets fired up, right? Is like seeing something in people and seeing them rise to that is so powerful. I'm curious, what do you say to the person who questions that encourager in you? Or like, is he for real? Like, can he really be that positive all the time? Is it just a show? Is it just a game? Do you ever get that pushback?
Oh, I get it all the time. And you might get this too. I think if you are overly positive or you have bigger energy, you're probably more prone to someone receiving you or perceiving you as inauthentic. So I think you have to even work harder at the art of authentic encouragement. It's the final chapter in the book, Jenny. And I tell this story about when I was 27 years old. I'm with Tim Bohannon in sort of this broken season. And Tim taps a friend of his on the shoulder. This guy's name is Bob Tykert. And Bob Tykert is a coach. He's sort of hard-nosed, old school. Tim had given him, obviously, my background. Hey, this kid got fired. He's really hurting. He's kind of moving fast and thinks maybe he's better than he actually is. I mean, I was kind of just a little bit of backdrop. I was overexposed and underdeveloped. I was just out front and I was leading and teaching, but I didn't really know who I was. And all of my identity was in my achievement. So that's just a little backdrop on who I was at 27. So I listened to Tim. Tim says, you're going to have this coaching session with Bob. It's at noon today, bring a notepad. And he didn't really tell me a lot other than that, but I just knew that Tim respected Bob enough to provide that time. So I marched down to that conference room, Jenny, at noon that day, and I opened the conference room door. And there's Bob Tykert standing in a jet black suit, red tie, hair's kind of slicked back on the sides. And he looks at me and he says, Jordan. And I said, Bob. I said, man, it is so nice to meet you. So I just heard so many amazing things about you. And he responded and said, that's great. Like what? And I said, oh, I mean, just, so many things. Like, where do I start? And he doesn't say anything. And I'm like, this is not going well. And so we sit down in these like black leather chairs around this big conference table. And there's this awkward sort of 10-second pause. And he puts his hand on the table and he sort of pats his hand and looks at his hand. And then he looks at me. He says, Jordan, I think you're sort of full of it. And I think you have an authenticity problem. And I want to help you with that. Wow. And right there in that conference room, Jenny, I just broke down to tears. And he knew the backstory because Tim had told him. And he knew that I had an authenticity problem. And man, that was a tell when I walked in there with a big old smile and tried to gas him up without any substance to support my comments.
That's big.
Isn't that big, right? And so we hear that. I think and one could have a tendency to believe, geez, Bob's kind of a curmudgeon, it seems a little harsh. But here's the deal. I think people feel more like Bob than we realize. When we praise them without any level of specificity,
that's really good.
Without any example, without any attachment to our words.
Yes.
And And I've been guilty of this. It's just easy to give the proverbial fist pound or high five. Hey, you're awesome. Keep rocking.
Totally.
And then somebody hears you say that to 10 people in a row and they're like, did she really even mean it? Like, or did Jordan really even mean that? And I really believe this, Jenny. If we do it enough, it can actually work against us. So I think if you're going to be an authentic encourager, and again, I think if you have bigger energy and you're highly relational, you have to work even harder at this. Let's make sure that we have substance, specificity. There's a story, there's an example that accompanies our encouragement. If I said to Jenny Catrone, Jenny, you are just an awesome podcaster. Keep it up. Okay, fine, right? And again, not that that'd be the worst thing.
Right.
That's different than if I said, Jenny, you're an awesome podcaster. Here's one of the things that I appreciate about how you handle your podcast. Right. You have the perfect level of commentary in questions. And you balance this really well. I don't know if you've been told this, but you balance asking the guest a question and then providing a little bit of commentary. And it's hard to find that perfect balance. Clearly, that's because of your experience. So, hey, just keep it up. I love that that's part of how you podcast. You're doing a great job.
Yeah.
Okay, that's just so much better than, Jenny, you're a great podcaster.
Totally. Again,
really simple, feels foundational, but I think so many times we miss it. And then it leads people back to your original question, questioning like, is he or she being for real?
That's right. Yeah. I love that distinction so much, Jordan. And it really doesn't take that much, does it? Just that you said substance specificity, of just like, okay, what's that layer deeper that brings more clarity, more insight into this, encouragement or whatever I'm sharing. Right. So valuable. Okay. So a lot of our listeners are leaders in nonprofits, churches, businesses. They're leading teams. Most of our listeners are leading teams of some kind. So can you apply this? You're already making the application, but let's talk about it more specific to the leader. Why, where does this apply for us? This idea of the art of encouragement, where does it apply for us? How do we need to be thinking about that? Maybe it's kind of building on, of course, some of the things you've already said, but talk to leaders specifically and what does this need to look like in our workplaces?
Yeah, well, I'll give you a little bit of data before we share some application. 2 different studies. One was in Harvard Business Review. They conducted some research of 4,000 recent college graduates who had taken a job and then quit within 12 months of graduating from college. So they came out of college with a degree, they took a job, and they had one thing in common. All 4,000 of them quit in the first 12 months. They all had different backgrounds, different degrees. They were in different industries. But they asked them this question, like, why did you quit? Mm-hmm. And the leading answer, in fact, 79% of them had the same number one answer. And it wasn't lack of encouragement, but closely tied to that, it was lack of appreciation. Ooh. And I find it interesting. So, it wasn't lack of culture, it wasn't lack of pay, lack of upward mobility or opportunity. It was lack of appreciation.
Wow.
And really what they were saying is, I didn't feel seen, I didn't feel known, I didn't feel valued. And so I decided to quit. So it clearly has created some retention issues and some cultural issues when people feel like this organization doesn't value me, doesn't see me. I don't even know if my work matters here. There's another guy named Brett Steinbarger who did some research with a bunch of America's top CEOs. And he asked them the question, where do you need to grow in your leadership? And he gave them a bunch of multiple choice answers. The top 2 answers, number 1 was, I need to have a better understanding of how the finances work in our organization, how the money flows, financial structure. And number 2 was technology. I need to better understand how technology is impacting our organization. And I feel behind or out of touch. But then Brett and his team did something really interesting, Jenny. They interviewed the teams that work with and under these leaders. And they asked the teams this question, where does your leader need to grow most in their leadership? Guess what they did not say? Anything about finance or technology. Yeah, that's right. But here's what they said. They said, number 1 was communication. I wish my leader was a better communicator. Number 2 was emotional intelligence. I wish my leader was more in tune with how she was making me feel.
Yeah.
So what do we know about communication and emotional intelligence? Communication is a conversation of like, where are you taking me? Emotional intelligence is a conversation of how are you treating me?
Yeah.
Both of those things are rooted in feel. You know, Maya Angelou famously said, people might not remember what you said or what you did, but they're always going to remember how you made them feel.
Yeah.
So for the leader listening to us today, I know a lot of your listeners and clients are leading the corporate space, right? Leading a team.
Yeah.
Couple reminders. One is your people want you to communicate. They want you to treat them well. They're more impressed by your authenticity than they are your strengths. And if you learn to really help them feel seen, valued, and known, they're going to stay with you longer. They're going to perform better. And you know, this whole book is about tools that people can use to help people feel that way. But I just think if you're a leader listening, let's understand the facts. The most basic human need is the need to feel known, seen, and understood. Yeah. And so I'll pause there. We could get into the practical application, Jenny, but I wanted leaders to hear some of those data points.
Oh, that's really fascinating. And I love that distinction between what the leaders think they needed and what their team said they needed. That's super powerful, and really helpful. I'm curious about this, Jordan, and you may or may not have done research on this. Do you think it's different with, you know, the incoming generations of leaders that are coming into the workplace? Is this a greater value for them than maybe like our parents' generation? Or do you think there's a distinction there?
Yes. Okay. So much so. And I'm glad you asked that question. So, you know, our parents' generation, so if you take like baby boomers or even some Gen Xers, right? Like they took a job when they were young that they didn't like, that they weren't even the right fit for. And they probably went home and told their parents like, I don't really like this job. Or they told their friends, I don't really like this job. And their parents probably said, or their mentors or their friends said, I don't care, suck it up. You committed, put your work boots on, go to work, get it done. I remember, Jenny, I kind of got duped into a job working in the refuse department. Not that there's anything wrong with that work. I just wasn't cut out for it. Sure. I was 19 years old and I was a garbage man. Okay. I worked in the refuse department. I thought I was going to mow lawns for the city. Yeah. And my supervisor was like, hey, you know, sorry, man, but our parks department's full, but I get the spot in refuse.
That's a great spot for you.
Yeah, I was like, sure, man. I told you I'd work for you, so whatever. And then he's like, okay, great. He's like, this is your partner, Dave. That's your truck. I'm like, whoa, that's a garbage truck. And and then I went home and I told my dad, I'm like, Dad, Rodney has me like throwing garbage. And I'm like, I'm not going to do that. And my dad's like, yes, you are. You committed to Rodney. Like, you're going to see it through. And then I would go home and I'd tell my dad that summer, like, I do not want to throw garbage. And he's like, I don't care. You committed. Okay. So that was like, that's that generation, right?
Right. Yeah.
This younger generation, they have a lot more options. They grew up in a different era where I think some of the leadership was maybe a little softer in the home. And so yeah, I think they know, like, I can go elsewhere. I don't have to just kind of, you know, and there's some good in that, right? Like, people don't feel trapped or like they don't feel like I have to stay here. But here's the other thing I think is really interesting, Jenny. Jason Dorsey wrote about this in the book Zeconomy. Great book. If you lead people who are under the age of 30, you should order the book Zeconomy. It's all about leading Generation Z. And he said, Gen Z is different in this way. They're really, really different. They're different in a lot of ways, but in this way, they're very different. They grew up in an era of instant communication. Yeah. They never remember a time. Like, I remember, I think I got my first cell phone. I was a junior in high school. And I remember being like, whoa, I can text. And it took like an hour to send one sentence or whatever. But I at least remember that sort of moment. Yeah. They didn't have that moment. They grew up like from the time they were little itty bitty, like, our little guy can scroll on a phone when he's 2 years old. It's kind of freaky, right?
It is freaky. And they sometimes know how to do more than you do. That's really freaky.
Really freaky. Like, I'm going to my 13-year-old. I'm like, how do I fix this? And she's like, duh, Dad. Yeah, it's really freaky. But okay, so because of that, they learn to process very, very, very quickly. They want immediate answers, immediate communication. They are processing on their very first day of work. whether or not they can stay long-term.
Yes.
They're making subconsciously, they're making career decisions in the first 8 hours of a shift.
That's right.
And that is so different. So, but for the leader, it's like, man, then we really got to be on our game if they're analyzing and processing in that way. Another thing that Jason wrote about, this isn't in our book, but again, shout out to Jason. He said, a Gen Zer would rather hear from you a few times for 5 minutes in a week, like Monday, Wednesday, Friday for 5 minutes, versus have an hour-long meeting with you on a Monday.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
The reason is, again, they're used to a lot of touch points, a lot of communication, frequent right?
feedback.
DMs, text messages, frequent feedback. And so if you go a week without talking to them, they're like, my boss is dead. Like, doesn't even care. I don't even know if they work here anymore. And, again, you and I probably grew up more in the era of like, oh yeah, we had a Monday meeting. My boss poured into me. I got what I need for the week.
I'm still trying to convince leaders they need to do a one-on-one at least once a week.
Yes, right. I know. And now it's like, well, you better be plugged in, and you don't have to spend an hour, but you better give the discounts and the high fives. You better say to somebody, I see you, you matter. I know you work here. We're so glad to have you, because it matters to this generation more than it's mattered to any other generation. And again, it's not just because I think sometimes older people hear that and they're like, oh, they're so soft. Well, no, they grew up in a really different era with instant communication. So their life experience, their lived experience is vastly different.
That's right. Yeah. Gosh, Jordan, I love that you brought some of that out, because it's a fascinating dynamic right now of, in many ways I'm trying to encourage the leaders that I coach of like, you have got to have that regular like time with your team members to invest in them, to develop them, et cetera. And to your point, they are used to regular feedback. So, we're talking specifically about encouragement, but they're looking for feedback on everything. And a lot of the organizations that I'm working with, they're sometimes afraid to give feedback, or, they're afraid to give constructive feedback. And I've actually found like Gen Z just wants to know, where do I stand? Like, tell because to your point, they've gotten constant feedback all the time, and lack of feedback actually makes them insecure. That's my paraphrase, but that's how I experience it, is that lack of feedback makes them second guess what they're doing, doubt whether they're significant or valuable. And of course, the encouragement piece is such a key piece of the feedback they're looking for.
Yeah. I just saw this the other day, Jenny, that the average, and I wish I could cite the source, but I remember reading about it and thinking, hey, there's a lot of validity to this, that the average Facebook user in America will spend 2 years of their life on Facebook. That the average high school kid who has Instagram, this is hard to believe. Okay. And by the way, it's a function of direct messages. Okay. So if you hear this and you question it, just know that they're sending messages through Instagram, like text. Okay. The average high schooler who's on the Instagram platform in America checks Instagram 150 times per day. So you talk about direct feedback. They are so used to the instant hit, the instant gratification, the instant I see you, the instant you matter. Yep. And so if we're 20 years removed from that generation, or 30 years removed from that generation, we're so out of touch with how often their lived experience suggests that they need someone to validate them, see them, and know who they are. Yeah. And I love that question, Jenny, because the fact that you even asked it means that you're in touch with that, and you're in tune with that. Sure. So many leaders, again, I think just want to write off this generation, like, they just need to figure it out and be more like us. And I just don't think that works in the world of leadership.
I think it's continuing to evolve, right? And so
that's right.
It's funny. Even as you were saying that, I'm thinking of the fact that like I have most of the notifications off on my phone because it makes me crazy, right? Like I'm like, I don't want all those notifications. I don't want to be pinged every time something's going on. But that's the world they live in. That's what they're used to. And so I noticed that even for myself, like I'm still resisting that, but I need to understand it as a leader. Okay, I've got one last question for you. And we could keep going. Like we might have to do a part 2. We'll figure it out. I think you say in the book that encouragement supercharges well-being and productivity. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, I'm willing to go farther and to go harder and to put in more effort and energy for a leader who values me. I will value my work, and actually I'll value myself if I feel more valued.
Yeah.
So many of our, I think, especially young people today are still, and again, I think we forget this, they're still asking themselves this question. Do I matter? Do I matter? And when you help them matter, when you tell somebody you matter, whether they're young or they're not young, they're willing to work harder. And so Zig Ziglar has this awesome quote, sometimes someone has to believe in you before you'll believe in yourself. Yeah. And I think that the power of belief, the deposit of belief supercharges productivity. I will give up many parts of my life to serve a leader who sees me, values me. And conversely, if someone, I remember, Jenny, I had a boss when I was really young, and he would hug us, and then he would yell at us, and then he'd hug us. And I remember thinking, like, this is so creepy, And he's like, I do this because I love you, And we're like, you do this because you're really weird. And nobody wanted to be around it, like nobody liked the guy. And then conversely, I had this other boss where I'm like, I would do anything. Like, I would walk your dog, I'll get your mail. I'll like, if I just want to be around you, I want to spend time with you. I want to learn from you. And if I think back to that, what's interesting, Jenny, in both cases, I don't have a lot of very specific memories. Like, I can't hold on to anything that they did or said. I don't remember a lot, but I absolutely remember the way that they made me feel.
Yeah.
And so, I think for me, it was evidence of the fact that I am willing to work harder and go farther for the leader who makes me feel valued.
So good.
Anyway, you and I could geek out and jam out to this for a long time, but because we share this love of leadership and organizational health, and anyway, so really, but yeah, I that's what I believe about supercharging, productivity.
Love it. Okay, Jordan, I'll give you an opportunity. Any last thought or encouragement you would share with leaders listening, and then tell us how to connect more with you, get the book, etc.
Well, I'd say this, Jenny, you've been really encouraging to me. You showed up really prepared. You had actually sent me a long email with a whole bunch of questions that I did not read. So shame on me. But our friend and mutual, friend and mentor, John Maxwell, says that the way you prepare shows how much you care. Mm-hmm. And so you came into this podcast with a great level of care and understanding. You spent the first, probably 12 minutes just encouraging me, asking great questions, being really present. Y'all should know this. It's almost 4:00 on a Friday afternoon where both you and I live. Mm-hmm. And you don't have to be doing this, but you're like, I want to help you get this book out into the world and reach more people and like whatever I can do to help. And so here's my final words, be a Jenny Catrone for someone else. Like, go be that person who's just radically generous, super kind, overly prepared, over communicates. There's a reason, Jenny, that you've built the platform you've built. You have the network that you do. Somebody could look at you and think, well, if only I had her skill set or her ability to communicate, or if only I was as smart as Jenny. What I know about Jenny is she's worked really, 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 really hard at the art of encouragement. And again, I do think it comes natural to you. Like, there's some natural ability that you've been given, but I also think you've worked really, really hard at helping people to feel seen and known and valued. So for that, I would say thank you for having me on your show. And I just have loved the time with you.
Likewise. Jordan, thank you so much. We are grateful just for your voice and the encourager that you are to so many leaders. And tell us where to connect more with you. Tell us about your podcast. And then finally, where to get the book.
Okay. Well, you will very soon be able to listen to the Jenny Catrone episode on the Growth Over Goals podcast. That's our podcast. Can't wait for the release of your book, Jenny.
Thank you.
And the book can be found at the artoфencouragementbook.com. So it's the artoфencouragementbook.com. If you order it, you'll have access to a webinar that we're doing with John Gordon, Ryan Leak, Jess Ekstrom, and David Nurse. And so there's a little 1-hour webinar on July 12th. You can register for that webinar when you go to the link, theartoфencouragementbook.com. And then, hey, would love to connect. I'm pretty active on social media, just like you are, Jenny. So if any of your listeners wants to send a message, if you have a thought, a question, feel free to share. I try to respond to all of that communication. And to each listener who tuned in, thanks for spending some of your valuable time with us. I very much appreciate it. So, and thank you, Jenny, for hosting me today.
Awesome. Jordan, thank you so much. This was fantastic. So practical, so helpful, and so encouraging to all of us as leaders to keep leading well. So thanks for joining us today.
Jenny, be well and be great. Appreciate you, my friend.
Okay, friends, I wasn't lying, was I? It was a good one. Jordan is such a fantastic leader, just an intentional person. And I think you could just hear why this book is such an overflow of who he is. So I would love to hear what you thought about the episode. Be sure to go check out Jordan's new book. Make sure you grab a copy of it. Share this episode with a friend. Maybe your team is trying to figure out, how do we increase feedback? How do we actually help our team feel seen and known? All of those things are huge culture builders, aren't they? And so this would be a great episode for you to share with someone else on your team. Maybe share it with your leadership team and talk about how do we increase our encouragement in our culture. And then share it with somebody else. Let us know what you thought about the episode. Connect on Instagram or Facebook at GetForesight, GET, the number 4, SIGHT, or we're on LinkedIn at the Foresight Group. You can also find me at Jenny Catron, JenniCatron. You can find me on all the socials. Be sure to send me a DM. Let me know you listened to this episode. And then again, if you would rate it, leave us that 5-star review. Tell us what you thought about it so it gives us good feedback. I need a little encouragement from time to time. Give me a little encouragement on how we're doing so that we can continue to create great content to serve you well. And finally, if you're looking for more leadership resources to help you and your team thrive, make sure you're signed up for my Insights newsletter. That is the weekly newsletter that I send, just keep catching you up with some of the things I'm thinking about in leadership and in culture. It's also where you're going to hear the newest and greatest about the book launch and all the things associated with that. So go to getforesight.com. That's GET, the number 4, SIGHT. Right there, you'll see a place to sign up for our Insights newsletter. And I promise you, I don't bombard you, but it is the place to get all the latest information of what we're doing here at the Foresight Group. All right, friends, thank you for joining me today. So glad that you are committed to leading well and building a thriving culture. And we will see you next week.